This looks fake. I'm calling compliance. This might be stolen money. The words didn't slip. They were launched, loud enough to silence the private client lounge. It was 9:42 a.m. on a quiet Monday in uptown Chicago, inside a marble-lined branch of Titan National, one of the most exclusive financial lounges in the state. Heads turned. Some blinked. Others just froze. The man who said it, Malcolm Drake, Senior Relationship Manager, 5 years in this branch, 15 in the industry, and in this moment, entirely certain he was protecting the bank. And the man he was pointing at, Warren Cole, 44, calm, silent, black. He stood at the teller window in a charcoal gray sweater, dark slacks, no watch, no briefcase. Just a leather folio in one hand and quiet resolve in the other. But now, the air around him was shifting. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Warren. Malcolm raised a hand and motioned to a junior associate. Take this to verification. Now, he held up the check, a cashier's note for $750,000, as if it might explode in his hand. Warren didn't flinch. He'd seen this before. This exact choreography. The slow lean-in, the stiff smile, the sudden volume spike, just loud enough for others to hear. 3 feet away, an elderly couple leaned back in their leather chairs. The wife clutched her bag tighter. The husband narrowed his eyes, like he was watching a performance. At the espresso bar, a young Latina woman paused mid-sip and turned her phone camera discreetly toward the scene. "What's the problem?" Warren asked, not cold, not angry, just aware. Malcolm stepped closer, lowering his voice, but keeping the tension sharp. "You walked in with no appointment, handed over a large check, and requested a private room. That's suspicious behavior. We're escalating it." "Run my name," Warren said again. "Everything you need is in your system." "Maybe," Malcolm sneered, "or maybe you got lucky with a printer and some Photoshop." The junior associate, now holding Warren's ID and business card, blinked at the name. Warren Elijah Cole, Executive Director, Cole Holdings Group. She hesitated. The name rang a bell. The logo on the card, a stylized black crown, looked familiar. But Malcolm didn't give her time. "Send it to back office. Tell compliance we have a potential account breach." Warren's posture didn't change. No fists, no raised voice. Only a slow blink, then a whisper from the side. "Did he say breach?" It was the guy in the corner, mid-30s, hoodie, startup energy. His phone was already recording. Warren didn't turn to him. Didn't need to. Malcolm turned toward the room as if claiming an audience. "We take fraud seriously here. And we've seen this trick before. Big check, fake ID, false claims." A pause, then louder. "This isn't a walk-in center. This is Titan." That's when the storm started. Not with a scream, but with a silence thick, deliberate, and far more dangerous. Warren Cole said nothing. He didn't have to. He was the storm, waiting, seated, and absolutely still. Warren Cole hadn't come here by accident. He chose this branch, this hour, this exact outfit. A charcoal gray sweater, sleeves rolled to the forearms. Slim slacks, polished but unbranded shoes. No gold, no flash, no armor. Because today wasn't about recognition. It was about confirmation. He sat back slightly as Malcolm stormed off with his check and ID. Still no expression, still no movement. Just a man in a bank, watching the room try to shrink him. The marble floors glowed beneath soft downlights. The kind of light designed to whisper wealth, not shout it. Warren didn't blink at it. He'd built better. 13 years ago, this same bank had rejected his first business loan. Said his restaurant expansion plan was too ambitious for someone without pedigree. He didn't argue then, either. He just found investors elsewhere. 7 years later, his holding company acquired a 15% stake in the very same bank, Titan National. 2 years after that, he increased it to 31%. Majority board seat, charter privileges, compliance override authority. but none of that was written on his sweater. That was the point. Across the room, a young employee, probably no older than 25, peeked over her monitor. She'd seen his name flash on internal records before. Cole Holdings. She'd even Googled him once. Saw the Forbes list, the keynote clip from Zurich, the black man who rebuilt mid-market banking through tech-driven ethics. But now, in the flesh, standing quiet in a room that didn't recognize him, she wasn't sure. So she waited. So did Warren. The murmur around him grew thicker. A middle-aged white woman and Pearls whispered, "They're just being careful. That's a lot of money." As if that explained the sneer in Malcolm's voice. As if suspicion was neutral. Warren rested his folio gently on the table. Inside, 6 pages of acquisition documents for internal memos, and a 1-page signed agreement giving him board-level veto over compliance decisions in this district. But he hadn't opened it. Not yet. Instead, he watched a young black man in a delivery uniform walk past the glass. Paused. Looked in. Eyes met. A nod. Warren returned it. Subtle. Shared. Understood. That's why he came today, not to withdraw. To measure. To feel the temperature of a space he technically ruled, but rarely touched. He wanted to see how his team operated when they thought he wasn't watching. Malcolm returned, with a clipboard, a scowl, a guard. "Sir," he said with forced control, "we've escalated your request to our compliance division. Until we receive confirmation, you won't be able to access private services or meeting rooms." Warren glanced toward the junior employee behind him. She looked down. "And your ID will be held by our team for security purposes." Malcolm added the last part with a slight lift in his chin, like he expected it to sting. Warren said nothing. Did nothing? Because all of this was the final piece of what he needed to know. He leaned back in the leather chair. "Calm still. I'm moving." Malcolm mistook it for defeat. That was his second mistake. The first, thinking he could spot power by the clothes it wore. The third was coming next. The air in the lounge had shifted. Not loud. Not yet. But tight, like something bracing to snap. Malcolm returned to his desk, motioned to the guard to stay close. The man nodded, stationed himself near the door, arms folded like judgment. Warren still hadn't moved. He didn't have to. Across the room, the junior banker with a discreet phone camera whispered to his colleague, I think that's Warren Cole." His voice barely broke the silence, but his tone cracked with realization. "No way," the other muttered, but his eyes lingered, longer than before. To clients near the espresso bar were watching too. One of them, a black woman in her 60s, muttered under her breath, "MMM. I know that stillness. That's not fear. That's power holding back." Her voice carried. Not far, but enough. Malcolm didn't notice. He was too busy performing. He adjusted his tie, checked his watch, then raised his voice just enough to make it seem like policy. "For the safety of our clients, we're reviewing suspicious activity. This is routine." It wasn't. Everyone knew it. But when said with authority, and justice tries to sound official, the receptionist, maybe 19, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her monitor blinked with Warren's name. Her screen said, "Verified executive priority." She didn't speak, but her finger hovered over the internal message tab. Still, silence held the room, until Warren finally broke it. "Mr. Drake," he said, not loud, but clear. Malcolm turned, startled. He hadn't expected to be addressed. "How long have you worked here?" The question floated like smoke. Casual, but burning. 5 years, Malcolm replied, squinting slightly. "Why?" Warren tilted his head. "In 5 years, have you ever verified an executive account before denying it access?" Malcolm blinked. "That's not relevant. You don't appear on our list of." "You didn't check." Warren cut in. His voice never rose, but it landed like a gavel. "You made a decision based on my appearance, not your protocol." Now people were listening. A man near the hallway leaned forward. A woman in pearls clutched her bag tighter, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was guilt. Malcolm cleared his throat. "I followed process." "No," Warren said, You followed a pattern. That sentence struck something, not just in Malcolm, in the whole room, because it wasn't just about one bank or one man. It was the echo of what so many had heard before. You don't belong here. This doesn't look right. Let me verify your story, not your ID. Warren reached slowly into his folio. No rush, no drama, just precision. He slid a single sheet of paper onto the polished table. Malcolm didn't move, but the receptionist gasped. The young banker leaned in. Corporate authorization, Warren E. Cole board level access, compliance override. It was signed, dated, embossed. Malcolm stepped back. His eyes darted to the guard, then to the clients. This, he stammered. This must be a setup. Warren looked at him, direct and blinking. No, he said quietly. This is a reckoning. And the room, once quiet, now hummed with a new tension. Not fear, not confusion, accountability. And it was just getting started. Sir, for your own protection, I'll ask you to wait outside until this is resolved. The guard's voice was even rehearsed, but something in his tone betrayed hesitation. He stood over Warren now, one hand close to his belt, not yet touching the radio clip there. Warren didn't look at him. He didn't need to. I'm safe where I'm seated, he replied. Still calm, he's still centered. The paper on the table, the one bearing his override, hadn't moved, but it had shifted the gravity of the room. The receptionist, now visibly pale, tapped her headset and whispered, "There's something wrong with the system. I'm seeing his name on Altier's executive board. Compliance, everything." Malcolm pretended not to hear. He adjusted his cuffs, straightened his tie again. Anything to delay the weight of that paper and the silence swallowing him. Across the room, the junior associate who'd first taken Warren's documents spoke, quiet, but clear enough. "Sir, this name, I think we need to call internal ethics, not security." Malcolm snapped, "You're out of your depth. Let me handle this." But his voice cracked not from volume, but from unraveling confidence. Warren still hadn't moved. His left hand rested on the arm of the leather chair. His right thumb tapped twice on the edge of his folio as signal. Somewhere, in an office 12 floors above, a phone rang, and someone answered it. Inside the lounge, Malcolm tried to regain the room. This doesn't change anything. For all we know, that paper is forged. Anyone can print a fancy letterhead, then verify it. Warren spoke again. 3 words. Surgical. Malcolm didn't move. "Call the number listed at the bottom of that sheet. Ask for Mia Cortez, Senior VP of Governance. Ask her what she thinks of this situation." His voice wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. It was anchored. Or better yet, Warren added, "Ask her why she hired me to clean this branch in the first place." That landed. The banker in the hoodie raised his eyebrows. The pearl-wearing woman blinked fast. Even the guard stoic, trained, shifted his weight. "You're bluffing," Malcolm muttered. Warren reached slowly into his folio again. This time, not a document, but a phone. He placed it face up on the table. On the screen, a call in progress with M.I. Cortez Titan Corp. A voice came through the speaker. Firm, female, unmistakable. "Mr. Cole, I have initiated live audit protocol on the branch per your escalation. Compliance has flagged inconsistencies already. Would you like me to proceed to step 2? Gasps now. Real ones. From real people. The guard stepped back. Malcolm stepped forward, but only to grab a control that had long since slipped through his fingers. "This is a setup. You planned this. You baited us." He gestured at the receptionist, the junior staff, the clients. He came and dressed like that. He wanted this reaction. Warren stood, for the first time, and when he did, the room changed with him. Not because he was loud, because he was undeniable. "No, Mr. Drake," he said, quiet but cutting. "I came and dressed like myself. You reacted like yourself. And that's the problem." He turned to face the room. The guard, the staff, the clients, every witness who had been part of the theater now seeing the script flip. "I didn't trap anyone today," he said. "I simply opened the door and watched who ran to close it." Silence. Then a phone buzzed. Then another. Clients were texting. Staff were checking feeds. Because the audit had gone live. And the truth? It had entered the room wearing a gray sweater, carrying nothing but facts, and refusing to be small. Warren Cole didn't have to raise his voice. He'd already raised the standard. Is this really happening? Someone whispered. The question didn't need an answer. It just hung there soft, shaken, real. Because everyone in the room now understood. Yes, this was happening. And it had been happening for years. Only now, it had a witness with power. Malcolm's mouth open, searching for language that didn't exist anymore. Not in this room. Not after that phone call. Mr. Cole, the guard said, tone now cautious, deferential. Do you want us to verify any additional credentials? No. Warren replied. I want you to stay exactly where you are and watch. Across the lounge, the young banker who had recorded the initial exchange pressed stop on his phone. He didn't post it. He didn't need to. He looked around and saw something far rarer than viral content. A system cracking in real time. Malcolm tried one more push. Even if you are who you say you are, this isn't how protocol works. There are procedures. Warren stepped forward, not aggressive, just deliberate. I design your procedures. Malcolm flinched. You executed none of them. You saw a black man with a large check and made a choice. Not based on data, not based on process, based on fear disguised as policy. That sentence, it didn't just cut through Malcolm. It echoed into the chest of every staff member watching. The receptionist, now trembling slightly, spoke. I saw his name light up red, not for alert, but for executive clearance. I didn't know what to do. Warren turned gently toward her. You paused. That's more than he did. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. Malcolm reached for something logic, power, denial, anything. We're under pressure. We see fraud all the time. We have to protect our clients. I am your client. Warren's voice was colder now, not loud, just inevitable. And more than that, I'm your employer. Then came the click, the heavy sound of a side door opening. From it stepped Veronica Chu, Regional Audit Director, flanked by two internal compliance officers. She didn't speak to Malcolm. She didn't have to. She walked directly to Warren and extended a tablet. Mr. Cole, we've begun the breach review. Your authority is confirmed at Tier 1. Do you want to proceed with internal enforcement? Warren didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room not for effect, but for witness. How many of you, he asked, turning to the staff, have watched something like this happen and said nothing? No one responded. Not because they didn't want to, because shame had found its voice first. How many of you have thought, this is just how it works? When a voice like mine was questioned more than a voice that lied. The room stood still. Clients were no longer seated. They stood now by the windows, near the coffee bar, arms crossed. Not in protest, in reckoning. You don't have to speak, Warren said. You already did the moment you chose silence. Malcolm tried again. You're making a scene. Warren smiled, the kind without humor. No. I'm documenting a culture. Then he turned to Veronica. Suspend every employee who touched this transaction chain. Effective immediately. Lock their terminals, revoke credentials, and forward the footage to internal legal. Confirm, she said. The receptionist gasped. The junior banker looked at Malcolm, then away. The security guard stepped back, subtly, as if removing himself from what was about to collapse. Malcolm went pale. You can't. I didn't mean for. I'm not here for your meaning, Warren said. I'm here for your impact. The paper still sat on the table. The screen still glowed with Mia Cortez's voice on hold. But the real proof was standing in a quiet room, no longer asking to be believed. He was just proving that he had never needed permission. You can't do this, Malcolm said, voice cracking as he stepped toward Veronica. There's a process. You can't just wipe out careers over a misunderstanding. Veronica didn't flinch. Misunderstanding is when someone forgets a name. This was deliberate dehumanization. She turned the tablet toward him. You labeled Mr. Cole's check possible forgery within 14 seconds. You escalated without verification. You initiated a security protocol meant for external threats. Her voice was clinical, cold, final. Malcolm reached for the desk behind him, gripping its edge like it could keep him upright. I was protecting the bank. Warren's eyes locked on him now. For the first time, his voice tightened. From what? Malcolm looked around. The question wasn't rhetorical. Warren wanted an answer. From misuse, from liability, from fraud. No, Warren said. You weren't protecting it from me because you didn't think I looked like someone who belonged. He took a single step forward. I built this place, Malcolm, not the marble, not the chairs, the trust, the credibility, the system. The room remained silent, phone still recording, eyes still watching, and you broke all of it in under 6 minutes. Across the lounge, the junior employee, the one who'd hesitated at first, cleared his throat. I should have said something. When I saw his name in the system, he stopped himself, then said it anyway. I was scared to be the only voice in the room. Warren turned to him. You weren't. You were just the only one who realized it. The receptionist took off her headset, quietly placed it on the counter. He's not wrong. I saw the override tag light up, too. I just thought someone higher up would catch it. Someone did, Warren said. He turned to Veronica. Add both of them to the exemption list. They didn't act, but they're acting now. Understood, she replied, tapping her tablet. Malcolm's voice rose again, more desperate this time. You can't just erase people's jobs because of one mistake. We were cautious. You were careless with consequence. Warren cut him off. And I don't rebuild institutions with people who gamble on bias. Then came the shift. A young woman near the back of the room, early 20s, clearly not bank staff, raised her phone. My dad applied here last year. Didn't get a call back. Had decades of experience. Black man. MBA. Military background. Nothing. Her voice trembled, but not from nerves, from anger wrapped in years of quiet. He thought maybe he wasn't good enough. She looked directly at Warren. Now I know better. Warren nodded once. What's your name? Jasmine Taylor. You want to work for an institution that doesn't punish skin before skill. She blinked. Yes. Send your resume to Mia Cortez. Tell her I said we start with the ones who were watching. Malcolm staggered back. So now you're hiring replacements on the spot. This is a circus. Warren's smile returned, soft but sharp. No, this is a correction. At that moment, Veronique's tablet pinged. She glanced down, then up. Corporate ethics has locked all accounts linked to Mr. Drake, including decision logs, email access, and personnel reports. You are officially under internal investigation. Malcolm stood frozen. The sound of finality wasn't loud. It came in pings, in gasps, in silence that swallowed him whole. You should leave now, Veronica said. He didn't move. Warren turned his back to him. The ultimate dismissal. We're done performing for people who think justice needs to scream. Sometimes it just needs to sign a document. And in that room that once echoed with suspicion now rang the sound of structure collapsing, and something better rising in its place. Not chaos, not revenge, but restoration. Malcolm didn't walk out. He shuffled slow, stunned, his shoes dragging across polished tile like regret had weight. No one clapped. No one cheered. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a burial of old habits, of silent consent, of faces that only saw value when it came wrapped in the expected. The door clicked shut behind him, and the room exhaled. Warren remained still, facing the center of the space like a conductor not yet done with his score. Let's be clear, he said, voice even. This isn't just about today. This is about every day it went unchecked. The young banker nodded slowly. The receptionist whispered yes under her breath, barely audible. Warren stepped toward the receptionist's desk. What's your name? Alyssa, sir. You're new. Yes, sir, 2 months. How long did it take you to recognize the override in the system? 10 seconds, maybe less. And how long did you wait before trusting your eyes? She looked down. Too long. Warren didn't correct her. Didn't shame her. Then remember that, because next time, the cost won't land on someone with my resources. She nodded, tears brimming not from guilt, but from recognition. She had just lived through a career's worth of lesson in one morning. Warren turned toward the junior banker, the one who filmed, who hesitated, who finally spoke. You recorded everything? Yes, sir, start to finish, and edited. Good. Keep it, not for the internet, for training. He smiled slightly. Make sure this never needs to go viral, because it never happens again. Then he tapped his phone. Mia, send me the names of every person this branch turned away in the last 90 days flagged as suspicious. As activity without escalation to ethics review. Already compiling, Mia's voice replied. Warren looked around. We're not just firing people today. We're fixing what let them stay. Jasmine, still holding her phone by her side, stepped closer. Sir, I didn't expect to get involved. I was just here to close my student loan account. Did you? No, she smiled. I think I just opened a new one. That made Warren laugh gently, deeply, from somewhere earned. Well, he said, then let's invest in something that pays back in integrity. He gestured to Veronica. Bring Jasmine on. Compliance Fellowship. Let her see what accountability looks like from the inside. Confirm, she said, already making notes. The tension in the room had thinned now, not vanished, but reshaped. Where fear had lived, clarity moved in. Where silence had ruled, direction now led. Warren looked once more at the paper on the table, the same sheet Malcolm had dismissed. Still there, still silent, but now, an artifact of resistance. We can rebuild trust, he said, addressing the entire staff. But it has to start here, in rooms like this, where power doesn't have to announce itself to be respected. He looked at the guard, the last figure who had once stood as a barrier. What's your name? Reggie. You held the line, even when it bent. That matters. I didn't know who you were, sir, Reggie admitted. Exactly. Warren nodded. And yet, you didn't escalate. You watched. You waited. You stayed human. That matters more than title. He reached into his folio, pulled out a second document, this one signed by Titan's National Security Director. Consider this your notice. You're being reassigned to Executive Integrity Detail. You'll report directly to me when I'm on site. Reggie's eyes widened. I thank you, sir. Earn it, Warren replied. And then, for the first time that morning, he turned toward the exit. But before he walked out, he paused by the front desk, looked once more at the staff, the clients, the space that had shown him its soul. Change doesn't begin when systems collapse. It begins when people decide they won't pretend anymore. He nodded to Veronica. Sweep the logs, clean the roster, rebuild. With what standard? She asked. Dignity, he said, and pushed the door open. The sunlight outside wasn't brighter, but Warren Cole was, and this bank finally would learn how to follow his light. The sidewalk outside the bank was quiet, but inside Warren, things were not. He walked slow. Not because he was tired, because he was thinking. Not about Malcolm, not even about the branch. He was thinking about the first time, 16 years ago, downtown Charlotte, a different bank, a smaller check, a younger version of himself. He had worn his best blazer, pressed slacks, polished shoes from a clearance rack, smiled at the teller, spoke clearly, waited patiently, and still, they looked at him like a thief. This ID looks off, she had said. We don't typically see business accounts under this name. She called her manager. He had stood off to the side. Clients had stared. Security had hovered. And Warren had walked out not with his funds, but with a lesson. They didn't need proof to doubt you. They just needed precedent. That day, he promised himself to things. He would never let their suspicion become his self-image. One day, he would own the space that tried to shrink him. And now, here he was, not just owning it, transforming it. He paused at the curb, eyes lifting to the bank's silver-lettered sign. Titan National. Bold, polished, confident. He had made it that way, but the people inside had forgotten who had signed the charter that gave them power. Not anymore. A black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and Mia Cortez stepped out. Sharp suit, no nonsense. "You left a trail of policy reform behind you," she said with a tight smile. "For suspensions, 1 termination pending legal, to promotions issued, 1 new hire fast-tracked. That's more movement in a day than HR's done all quarter." Warren didn't return the smile. "That's not movement, that's correction. True movement happens when they don't need me in the room to act right." Mia nodded. "We'll get there. Not if we treat this like PR." His voice hardened. "I don't want apologies. I want audits. I want training systems that recognize coded bias, not just overt slurs. I want data on who gets flagged and why." "Understood." They walked together, turning the corner, the bank disappearing behind them. "Do you want to issue a statement?" she asked. "Media's already calling. Someone leaked a clip." Warren paused. "Let them watch. Let them see what accountability looks like with a steady hand." "But no statement." "Why not?" "Because justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent." A car passed. A woman inside nodded to him. Warren nodded back. "Have legal send me the transcripts from Malcolm's case. I want to see every client he flagged in the past 12 months. There might be more victims." "Will do." Mia typed a quick note into her tablet. They reached the next intersection. Mia paused. "You ever think of just stepping back, letting the machine run without you? You've earned that." Warren looked ahead, nodded at her. "Machines don't change themselves. They need fingerprints. Until mine aren't needed, I'm not done." She didn't argue, just stepped aside as his driver opened the next car door. But Warren didn't climb in. He stood still for a moment, hands in pockets, eyes scanning the city skyline. Glass towers, shiny names, institutions dressed like progress but built on precedent. "We built this city," he said quietly. "Now it's time we audit it." And with that, Warren Cole turned from the bank that tried to strip him of his dignity and walked forward, with more power than ever. Not because he yelled, not because he fought, but because he stayed long enough to see the system bend, and brave enough to make it break. 3 days later, the footage went viral. Not by Warren, not by Titan Bank, but by a 19-year-old barista named Leah, who had served lattes just 10 feet from the confrontation. Her caption was simple. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just let the truth speak louder than the prejudice. 10 million views in 48 hours. Comment sections lit up with disbelief, rage, recognition. "He's the CEO. They really tried that. This happens every day, minus the happy ending." Imagine how many people were treated like that and had no proof, no power, no camera. Warren saw the clip, but he didn't repost it. He didn't need to. The world was already watching, and more importantly, so was the board. Titan National's Board of Governors issued an emergency statement. "We recognize Mr. Warren Cole's response not as damage control, but as damage reversal. His leadership sets the ethical standard this institution must uphold." The next day, Warren walked into the national headquarters not as a man accused, but as a man affirmed. The boardroom was silent when he entered. 20 executives, 12 board members, 3 compliance officers, all waiting. He didn't sit. "Let's talk about your real exposure," he began, eyes scanning the room. "It's not PR. It's not lawsuits. It's not shareholder panic." He paused. "Your real exposure is pattern." A few shifted in their seats. Others tried to hold posture. "You build a system where bias passes as instinct, where discretion disguises discrimination, where the comfort of the familiar is weaponized against those who don't fit." He placed a folder on the table. Inside, 17 flagged cases, 17 clients in different branches, marked non-compliant appearance or risk profile, inconsistent, all black, all legal, all turned away. This isn't one bad employee. It's a culture trained to trust perception over policy. Silence. Then one board member asked, "What do you propose?" "I don't propose. I implement," Warren said. Underscore effective immediately. Bias audits every 90 days, per branch. Anonymous escalation pods for internal bias reports. New onboarding that centers anti-bias practice, not just day compliance. Underscore. He leaned forward, and every branch manager will spend days shadowing clients. They flag to feel what it's like to be seen as a threat instead of a customer. One executive cleared her throat. We'll need budget for that. Warren looked at her, steady. No, you'll need courage. That landed. He let the silence stretch. Then, quietly, the cost of dignity isn't higher than the cost of discrimination. You just got used to paying the wrong bill. A few heads nodded. Others didn't, but the message was no longer optional. Warren gathered his folder, turned to leave, then stopped. For the record, I didn't walk into the branch to teach a lesson. I walked in to make a deposit. He glanced back, a quiet edge in his voice. They ended up making a withdrawal from the integrity account, and with that, he walked out not because the meeting was over, but because the movement had already begun. 2 weeks later, Warren returned to the same branch. No cameras, no press release, just a black coat, a calm walk, and a name that now carried a different kind of weight. The new branch manager, a Latina woman named Rosa Delgado, met him at the door. "Mr. Cole, it's an honor," she said, her voice clear but humbled. Warren nodded. "Let's not make it about honor. Let's make it about habit." They walked the length of the lobby. Same marble floors, same soft lights. But the energy had shifted. The staff stood straighter not out of fear, but focus. Posters on the wall had changed too. One caught Warren's eye. Dignity is not a service. It's a standard. Underneath, Titan Values Initiative launched by Warren E. Cole. He paused at the espresso bar. Leah, the barista who filmed the original encounter, was still there, but this time, she wore a new badge. Cultural Liaison Client Relations Team. "You stayed," Warren said. "You changed the building. Figured I could help change the people." She handed him a cup. Not just any cup. The sleeve bore a new quote. "You don't have to raise your voice to raise the bar." Warren smiled, but not for show. For memory. For progress. He turned toward Rosa. "Walk me through the new protocol." She didn't flinch. "Client intake now flags all escalations to a 3-person ethics review. If a compliance call is made, it's logged for weekly oversight, and all staff are trained to identify unconscious bias scenarios with real examples, including yours." Warren raised an eyebrow. "You use my case. We start with it." Rosa smiled. "It shuts down every but what if in the first 5 minutes." Warren nodded. They moved toward the VIP lounge, the same one he'd been denied access to weeks prior. Now, the doors opened before he even reached them. Inside, a small orientation was taking place. Jasmine, the woman who had spoken up about her father, stood at the front. "When systems don't question themselves," she told the new hires, "they end up questioning the wrong people. That's what we're here to fix." She saw Warren. Paused. "The man who showed us how." He stepped forward, didn't say much, just met her eyes. "You were always capable. You just needed context." She smiled. "Now I give it to others." Later that afternoon, Warren walked the perimeter of the building, stopped beneath a newly installed plaque at the entrance. Polished steel etched with a single sentence. "This institution recognizes that silence in the face of bias is complicity. May every client walk in knowing they belong." He stood in front of it for a long time. Not for the camera. There was none. Just for the memory. Of the boy in Charlotte. Of the man in the lobby. Of the future he refused to surrender. And somewhere, deep in the walls of the bank, a new kind of pulse was starting. Not built on denial. Not powered by fear. But humming with the quiet, steady rhythm of justice that no longer had to explain itself. Because when dignity becomes the default, silence no longer has the last word. The ripple wasn't just local. In Philadelphia, a teller flagged an internal memo and paused before calling security on a black teenager. Depositing scholarship funds. She remembered the Warren Cole footage. She asked one more question. Verified. Apologized. And walked the boy to the private desk herself. In San Diego, a regional manager initiated a self-audit not because she was told to, but because she had watched every second of what happened at the Chicago branch. She rewrote the onboarding script, cut the coded phrases, replace them with clarity. And in Atlanta, a father who had been rejected by Titan a year earlier received a phone call, not from customer service, but from Warren himself. "I can't undo what they did to you," Warren said, voice steady over the line, "but I can make sure they don't do it to your son." The man didn't speak for several seconds, then just said, "Thank you, not for the call, for remembering." This was the revolution Warren had been building, not through fire, not through fury, but through architecture, quiet, intentional, unshakable. He didn't need headlines anymore. His work was in the shadows now, not hiding, but holding. He moved through boardrooms, classrooms, policy meetings. He sat on panels not to speak, but to watch who avoided the questions. He funded startups not for their pitch, but for their people. He backed institutions that hadn't forgotten who institutions are supposed to serve. Every now and then, someone would ask, "How do you know if it's working?" And Warren would smile. When the right people stop whispering and the wrong ones start sweating. At Titan's annual summit, he took the stage not as a keynote, but as a presence. He walked into the ballroom in a sweater. No tie, no Rolex, no signal of status, because his existence was the statement. The room rose before he said a word. He let the silence stretch. Then he spoke. "What we do here is not about avoiding lawsuits. It's about confronting legacy. It's about admitting that the systems we built were efficient, but not always ethical. Precise, but not always just." He let that sink in. Change isn't compliance. Change is character. And character doesn't show up when you're praised. It shows up when you're tested. He gestured toward the crowd. Every branch, every desk, every decision. If we are not willing to be uncomfortable, we are not willing to be better. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was slow, rising, real. The kind that came from people no longer clapping for a speech, but for a standard. Warren stepped off stage and back into his life, the one built not on protection, but on disruption done with discipline. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to be effective. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't walk alone. 1 month later, Warren returned to the Chicago branch not to inspect, not to enforce, but to listen. He arrived early. No entourage, no announcement, just him. The staff had changed. The tone had shifted. But what struck him most was the quiet. Not the silence of tension, but the calm of culture. A new rhythm. The receptionist greeted him by name, not because of rank, but because she knew it was right. "Mr. Cole, would you like a seat in the executive lounge?" "No need. I'll wait with everyone else." He took a seat by the window. Watched people come in, young, old, dressed in suits, dressed in uniforms. They were all greeted with the same sentence. "Welcome. How can we serve you today?" No pauses. No second glances. No tones dipped in doubt. Warren closed his eyes. He remembered the humiliation, the paper on the table, the words, "This might be stolen money." He remembered standing, not to shout, but to reclaim space. And now, watching this new morning unfold, he felt something rare. Stillness without suspicion. The junior banker, the one who had recorded everything, now wore a new badge, ethics liaison. He caught Warren's eye. "Sir, we're still watching, and we're still learning." Warren nodded. Good. The goal was never perfection, just progress. From the back, Jasmine approached, confident, crisp, clipboard in hand. "Compliance logs are cleared. Escalation reports are down 48%. Bias intervention training past 100% participation. And client satisfaction?" She smiled. "Up 61%, especially among first-time walk-ins." Warren chuckled. "So, people like being treated like people. Who would have thought?" They shared the laugh. Not loud, but full. He stood, glanced at the clock. "Time for me to go." "Back to headquarters?" Jasmine asked. He shook his head. "No, back to the city. To listen, to check, to make sure the ripples don't stop here." As he walked toward the door, Rosa, the new branch manager, stepped out of her office. "Mr. Cole, there's something I want you to see." She led him to a side wall, freshly painted. On it, framed in glass and steel, hung a permanent exhibit. Photographs, quotes, a timeline. But at the center, a still from the original confrontation. Warren seated, check on the table, eyes forward, unbothered, unbowed. Below it, an engraved steel. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the standard. Warren E. Cole. He looked at it for a long time. Not with pride, with memory. Because that image wasn't just about him. It was about every voice silenced by suspicion. Every hand pushed away from the table. Every step interrupted by someone who thought power had a look. He turned back to Rosa. Thank you for showing me. But make sure the wall doesn't do the work for you. It won't, she said. Good. Because justice doesn't live in pictures. It lives in choices made daily, quietly, when no one's watching. And then, once again, he pushed the door open and stepped into the daylight. Not to escape, but to expand. Because his work was never just about fixing a bank. It was about building a world where dignity walks in first and never needs to prove it belongs.